The blood collector arrived at dawn, and Thea Dalton knew someone would have to die. She stood in the doorway of her family's farmhouse, watching the black carriage roll down the dirt road toward the village square. Its sleek, modern design looked wrong against the rural backdrop of Ashford, a small farming community nestled in the valleys of northern England, where most families still worked the land by hand, and technology remained sparse by choice. The carriage's windows were tinted so dark they seemed to swallow light itself, and the horses pulling it moved with an eerie, synchronized grace that made Thea's stomach turn. Her younger sister, Molly, pressed against her side. "Is it really them?" "Yes!" Thea wrapped an arm around the 15-year-old's shoulders. "Stay inside. Don't let them see you." "But the tribute, I said stay inside." Thea's voice came out sharper than she intended, but fear made her cruel. She softened it with a kiss to Molly's temple. "Please, just trust me." Molly's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded and retreated into the house. Thea heard her mother's soft weeping from the kitchen, a sound that had become constant over the past 3 days, ever since the notice arrived. Every household in Ashford had received the same message, written in elegant script on paper so fine it seemed to glow in moonlight. The tribute is due. 1 life, freely given, or 10 will be taken by force. It was the same demand that came every decade, regular as clockwork, ever since the Treaty of Shadows had been signed 2 centuries ago. Vampires ruled the night. Humans ruled the day. And in places like Ashford, tucked away from the major cities where the separation between species remained more theoretical than actual, villages paid in blood to maintain the peace. Thea had been 8 years old during the last collection. She remembered Mrs. Harrison, the baker's wife, stepping forward with her head held high. She remembered the vampire collector, a tall woman with hair like spun silver and eyes the color of fresh blood, taking Mrs. Harrison's hand almost gently. She remembered the screaming that came later, after the carriage had disappeared into the forest. No one knew exactly what happened to the tributes. Some said they were drained and discarded. Others whispered about worse fates, eternal servitude, transformation into something neither living nor dead, imprisonment in the vampire courts beneath the earth. The only certainty was that no tribute had ever returned. Thea pulled on her jacket and walked toward the village square. Other families were emerging from their homes, faces gray with dread. There were perhaps 300 people in Ashford, spread across 50 households. Everyone knew everyone else's children, everyone's grief, everyone's secrets. The carriage had stopped in the center of the square, near the old stone well. The door opened, and the vampire stepped out. He was not what Thea expected. She had braced herself for something monstrous, something obviously predatory. Instead, the vampire who emerged into the early morning light filtered through heavy clouds that made the world gray and dim, looked like a prince from a dark fairy tale. He stood well over 6 feet tall, his frame lean and powerful, beneath a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than Thea's entire house. His skin was pale as moonlight, luminous and flawless, and his hair fell to his shoulders in waves of pure white that seemed to catch and hold what little light touched it. His features were sharp and aristocratic, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, lips that curved with what might have been amusement or contempt. But it was his eyes that froze her in place. They were a deep, burning crimson, ancient and knowing, and when his gaze swept across the gathered villagers, Thea felt the weight of centuries pressing against her mind. "Good morning." His voice carried easily across the square, rich and cultured with an accent Thea couldn't place. Old European, perhaps, from a time before modern borders. "I am Theron Constantinos, Lord of the Northern Territories and emissary of the Vampire King. I have come to collect the tribute owed under the Treaty of Shadows." Silence greeted his words. Thea saw her neighbors clutching each other, saw old Thomas Garrett trying to hide his granddaughter behind his bulk, saw the mayor, a portly man named Richard, who had never been particularly brave, trembling where he stood. Theron's eyes narrowed slightly. "The treaty is clear. 1 life given willingly, or I am authorized to select 10 at my discretion." He paused, letting the threat hang in the air. "I strongly suggest you choose the former." Still, no one moved. Thea's heart hammered against her ribs. She thought of Molly, barely more than a child. She thought of the Davies twins, just turned 18 last month. She thought of Sarah Winters, who was pregnant with her first baby. She thought of Mrs. Harrison's screams. "Very well." Theron began to walk forward, his movements liquid and predatory. "I shall choose." He moved toward the Davies family first, and Thea saw young Emma Davies go white as fresh snow. The girl had everything ahead of her university acceptance, a scholarship, dreams of becoming a doctor. Her parents tried to step in front of her, but Theron simply looked at them, and they froze as if turned to stone. Thea didn't remember making the decision. One moment she was standing with the crowd, the next she was striding forward, her voice loud in the terrible silence. Stop. Theron turned to her, one elegant eyebrow rising. Yes? Her mouth had gone dry, but she forced the words out. Take me. I'll go willingly. Just leave everyone else alone. A murmur rippled through the crowd. She heard her father shout her name, heard running footsteps behind her, but she didn't turn around. She kept her eyes locked on Theron's crimson gaze, refusing to let him see her terror. Thea, no! Her father grabbed her arm. You can't! Someone has to, Dad. She turned to him, seeing the anguish in his weathered face. Her father was a good man, a farmer who had worked himself to the bone to provide for his family. And I won't let them take anyone else, not Emma, not the twins, not anyone with a future. You have a future, he said desperately. You're only 23. I'm a farmhand with no prospects and no plans. She tried to smile, tried to be brave. It's okay, really. It wasn't okay. It would never be okay. But it was necessary, and Thea had always been practical above all else. Theron watched this exchange with an expression of cool interest. When Thea finally pulled away from her father and walked toward him, the vampire tilted his head slightly, studying her. Your name? Thea Dalton. And you offer yourself freely? No coercion, no force. I offer myself freely. The words tasted like ash. Interesting. Theron circled her slowly, and Thea felt like prey being evaluated by a predator. Most tributes must be dragged forward. You step up without hesitation. Why? Does it matter? Humor me. Thea lifted her chin. Because if someone has to die, better me than someone who has something worth living for. Something flickered in Theron's eyes, surprise perhaps, or calculation. You assume death is your fate, isn't it? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached out and took her hand. His skin was cool against hers, smooth as marble. Come. Thea looked back once at her family. Her mother had collapsed in her father's arms, sobbing. Molly stood in the doorway of their house, tears streaming down her face. Her neighbors watched with expressions of grief and guilty relief. Then Theron led her to the carriage, and the door closed behind them, and the world she knew disappeared. The interior of the carriage was impossibly luxurious velvet seats in deep burgundy, polished wood panels, small lamps that gave off a soft golden glow. It was larger inside than seemed possible from the outside, and Thea wondered if vampire magic was at work. Theron settled into the seat across from her, his movements precise and graceful. The carriage began to move, though Thea heard no command given. You may ask questions, Theron said. Most tributes do. Thea swallowed hard. Will it hurt? That depends. On what? On whether you fight. His eyes gleamed in the lamplight. If you submit peacefully, death can be quite gentle. A few moments of ecstasy, then sleep. If you resist, he shrugged. Well, it becomes considerably less pleasant. Thea's hands clenched in her lap. How long do I have? Eager to be done with it? I'd like to know if I should bother getting comfortable. A smile played at the corners of his mouth. It made him look younger, though Thea suspected he was centuries old. We have some distance to travel. The vampire court is not nearby. The court? Did you think I would simply drain you by the roadside? Theron sounded almost offended. The tribute must be presented to the king. It is he who decides the final fate. Hope sparked in Thea's chest, small and fragile. Decides? So death isn't certain? Nothing is certain. Theron leaned back, his gaze assessing. Tell me, Thea Dalton, what do you know of vampire society? Only what everyone knows. You rule the night. You drink blood to survive. You're stronger and faster than humans. Sunlight can kill you, though you can manage brief exposure under cloud cover. She gestured toward the tinted windows. Hence the precautions, all true, if somewhat simplified. Theron steepled his fingers beneath his chin. Do you know why we demand tributes? To keep humans afraid. To maintain your power, a common assumption, and entirely wrong. He leaned forward slightly. We demand tributes because the alternative is war. 200 years ago, vampires and humans slaughtered each other across Europe. Cities burned. Entire bloodlines, both human and vampire, were extinguished. The Treaty of Shadows ended that conflict by establishing clear boundaries and regular exchanges. A few lives given willingly, in exchange for the safety of entire communities. That's supposed to make me feel better about being sacrificed? I'm not trying to make you feel anything. I'm explaining the reality of your situation. Theron's expression remained neutral. You chose to step forward. That choice will be remembered when the king passes judgment. Thea looked out the window, watching the countryside blur past. They were moving impossibly fast, faster than any normal vehicle could manage. What's he like? The king? Powerful, ancient, fair, by his own standards. Theron paused, and currently in need of a solution to a rather delicate political problem. What kind of problem? The kind that might determine whether you live or die. They traveled for hours, leaving behind the farmland and forests of the north, heading toward the great cities of the south. Thea dozed fitfully, her dreams full of blood and screaming. When she woke, night had fallen, and the tinted windows had been rolled down slightly. Cool air rushed in, carrying the scent of rain and urban decay. "Where are we?" she asked. "London, or rather beneath it." Theron gestured out the window. "The vampire court maintains several entrances throughout the city. We'll be using the one beneath the old Victorian station." Thea peered out and saw they were entering an underground tunnel, descending into darkness. Lights flickered past electric, but designed to mimic old gas lamps. The architecture shifted from modern concrete to Victorian brick to something even older, medieval stone that looked like it belonged in a castle. How far down does it go? Far enough that sunlight will never reach, far enough that humans rarely venture. Theron's smile was sharp. "Welcome to the Court of Shadows, Miss Dalton." The carriage finally stopped in what appeared to be an enormous underground cavern. Thea stepped out and found herself standing in a space that defied logic. The ceiling arched hundreds of feet overhead, supported by massive stone pillars carved with intricate designs. Buildings rose on either side, a mix of medieval architecture and modern elements, creating something entirely unique. Vampires moved through the streets, dozens of them, all with that same otherworldly beauty. Pale skin, white or silver hair, eyes in shades of red and amber and gold. They stopped and stared when they saw Thea. "Ignore them," Theron said quietly, taking her elbow. "You're under my protection until we reach the throne room. And after that, you're under the king's judgment." He led her through winding streets and up a grand staircase carved into the cavern wall. Other vampires watched their progress with varying degrees of interest and hunger. Thea tried not to think about the fact that she was probably the only human in a city of predators. The throne room was exactly as opulent as she had imagined. More so, perhaps. The ceiling was painted with elaborate frescoes depicting vampire history battles, treaties, coronations. Chandeliers hung from golden chains, their light reflecting off polished marble floors. And at the far end of the room, elevated on a dais of black stone, sat the throne itself. The vampire king rose as they approached. He was, in a word, magnificent. Where Theron was lean and graceful, the king was built like a warrior, broad-shouldered and powerful, his presence commanding even from a distance. His hair fell in white waves past his shoulders, and his eyes burned like coals in the lamplight. He wore black leather and dark silk, and a crown of silver and black diamonds rested on his brow. "Theron." The king's voice resonated through the chamber. "You return promptly, as commanded, your majesty." Theron bowed, then gestured to Thea. "The tribute from Ashford." She came willingly. The king's gaze fixed on Thea, and she felt the weight of his attention like a physical force. He descended from the dais in 3 long strides, moving with inhuman speed until he stood directly before her. "Look at me." Thea lifted her eyes to meet his, refusing to cower despite every instinct screaming at her to run. The king studied her in silence for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. "What is your name?" "Thea Dalton, your majesty." "Thea." He spoke her name like he was tasting it. "You stepped forward to save your village." "Yes." "Why?" "Because someone had to, and I couldn't stand by and watch innocents be taken. Innocents." The king's smile widened slightly. "And you do not count yourself among them?" "I'm old enough to make my own choices. Children and young people with futures ahead of them, they deserve protection." "Interesting." The king glanced at Theron. "You were right. She is unusual." Thea's confusion must have shown on her face, because Theron spoke up. "I sent word ahead, after our conversation in the carriage. I thought His Majesty would find your case relevant to his current situation." "What situation?" Thea asked. Though she suspected it was rude to question a vampire king directly, to her surprise, the king laughed a rich, genuine sound. "You have courage, little human. Very well, I will explain." He turned and walked back toward the throne, gesturing for them to follow. "I am Tiberius Constantine, king of the European vampire courts, and I am being pressured to take a bride." Thea blinked. "I see, do you?" Tiberius settled back onto his throne, one leg crossed over the other. "For the past century, the various noble houses have been pushing their daughters forward, each hoping to secure a marriage alliance that would elevate their status. It has become tedious in the extreme. I have refused them all." "Your Majesty." An elderly vampire stepped forward from the shadows. He wore elaborate robes and had an air of authority. "Perhaps this discussion is not appropriate for a tribute. She is more than a tribute now, Cassius." Tiberius waved a dismissive hand. "Or at least, she might be. That depends on her answer." Thea's heart began to race. "My answer to what?" Tiberius leaned forward, his crimson eyes intense. "I need a bride to satisfy the noble houses and end their constant maneuvering." but I have no interest in a vampire bride who would come with political expectations and family alliances. What I need is someone unexpected, someone who would throw the entire court into confusion, someone," he paused, "someone who offered her own life for her village." The implications hit Thea like a physical blow. "You want me to marry you? I want you to consider the option." Tiberius stood again, descending the dais to stand before her. "You came here expecting death. Instead, I offer you something far more interesting. Become my queen, and your village will be forever exempt from tributes. Your family will be provided for beyond their wildest dreams. You will have wealth, power, and protection, and in exchange, you play the role of devoted bride. You stand at my side during court functions. You help me navigate the political minefield of vampire society." His expression grew serious. "And you accept the reality that this would not be a marriage of love. I am offering you a business arrangement, Miss Dalton, a mutually beneficial alliance." Thea's mind reeled. She had walked into that carriage prepared to die. Now she was being offered a crown. "This is insane, perhaps." Tiberius's lips quirked. "But is it any more insane than offering yourself as a sacrifice?" He had a point. Thea looked around the throne room, at the opulent wealth, at the vampires watching with expressions ranging from shock to outrage. She thought of her village, of Molly, of all the futures she had hoped to save. "If I say no, then you die, and I continue to be harassed by ambitious nobles, and your village pays another tribute in 10 years. Tiberius shrugged. "If you say yes, everyone benefits." "Except the nobles who wanted their daughters on the throne." "Precisely, which is an excellent bonus from my perspective." Despite everything, Thea felt a laugh bubble up in her chest. It came out slightly hysterical. "You're serious. You actually want to marry a human farmhand despite the vampire nobility, among other reasons." Tiberius moved closer until only a foot separated them. "I want someone who understands sacrifice. Someone who won't be corrupted by power because they never sought it in the first place. Someone brave enough to look me in the eye and ask difficult questions." He tilted his head. "You are all of those things, Thea Dalton, and I think you would make an extraordinary queen." Thea's breath caught. This close, she could see the fine details of his face, the faint laugh lines at the corners of his eyes, the slight imperfection in his lower lip where a scar had once been. He looked younger than she had initially thought. Perhaps 30 in human terms, though she knew he must be centuries old. He was also, objectively, the most beautiful man she had ever seen. "I need time to think," she said finally. "You have until dawn." Tiberius stepped back, his expression cooling back to regal neutrality. "Theron, show Miss Dalton to the guest quarters. Make sure she has everything she needs." "Your Majesty." Theron bowed, then gestured for Thea to follow. As they left the throne room, Thea heard the burst of conversation behind them, vampire nobles arguing in multiple languages, their voices sharp with anger and disbelief. "You've caused quite a stir," Theron remarked as they walked through a corridor lined with portraits. "I didn't ask for any of this." "No, which is likely why he chose you." Theron glanced at her sidelong. "The king is many things, but impulsive is not one of them. If he made this offer, he has reasons beyond simple political maneuvering." "Like what?" "That I cannot say. I am his emissary, not his confidant." They stopped before an ornate door. "These will be your rooms. Food will be brought shortly, human food. To be clear, we're not barbaric. Rest, think, and give your answer before sunrise." Thea entered the room and found herself in what could only be described as a luxury suite. The bed was enormous, covered in silk sheets and velvet pillows. A fireplace crackled merrily in one corner. French doors led to a balcony that overlooked the underground city, its lights twinkling like stars in the darkness. She walked to the balcony and stepped outside, breathing in the cool, recycled air. Somewhere far above, the real world continued her family grieving, her neighbors relieved, the sun rising and setting without her, and here she stood, contemplating marriage to a vampire king. It should have been an easy decision. Death or life, poverty or wealth, obscurity or power. But Thea had never been good at choosing the simple path. She thought about what Tiberius had said, a business arrangement, not love. Could she live with that? Could she marry someone knowing affection would never grow between them? She thought of Mrs. Harrison's screams. She thought of Molly's future, of her parents growing old without the constant fear of the next tribute collection. She thought of Emma Davies and the twins and all the people she had saved by stepping forward. When Theron returned before dawn, Thea had made her decision. "I'll do it," she said. "I'll marry him, but I have conditions." Theron's eyebrows rose. "You wish to negotiate with the vampire king? If he wants me to be his queen, he can handle a few reasonable requests." To his credit, Theron looked impressed rather than offended. "Very well. Present your conditions." Thea ticked them off on her fingers. First, my family receives financial support immediately enough to live comfortably for the rest of their lives. Second, Ashford is permanently exempt from all tributes, not just for this generation. Third, I want to be able to visit my family at least twice a year. And fourth, she took a breath, I want the truth about what happens to tributes, about what this marriage really means. No lies, no pretty stories. If I'm doing this, I need to know exactly what I'm getting into. Theron was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. Wait here. He returned 20 minutes later with Tiberius himself. The king had removed his crown and wore simpler clothing, black trousers, and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked more approachable this way, more human, though the power still radiated from him like heat from a fire. Theron says you have conditions. Tiberius crossed his arms, leaning against the doorframe. I'm listening! Thea repeated her list, her voice steady despite her nerves. Tiberius considered her words, then nodded slowly. Your first 3 conditions are easily met. I can have funds transferred to your family by nightfall. The exemption will be written into law immediately. And, of course, you may visit them with appropriate security, naturally. As for your 4th condition, he paused. What happens to tributes varies. Some are kept as servants in noble houses. Some become blood donors, living in relative comfort in exchange for regular feeding. Some are killed outright if they prove difficult, or if their collector has particularly brutal tastes. And some, he met her eyes. Some are offered other opportunities, as you are being offered now. So the screaming we hear is usually from the feeding process. It can be painful if done carelessly or cruelly, or it can be quite pleasurable if done with skill. Tiberius's expression remained neutral. As for what this marriage really means, you would become my legal wife and queen consort. You would not be required to share my bed unless you wished it. You would not be fed upon unless you consented. You would have your own rooms, your own staff, and considerable autonomy within the bounds of court protocol. But I would still be a human in a vampire court. Yes. Which means you would face considerable prejudice from the nobility. You would be seen as an interloper, an insult to tradition, a symbol of everything they despise about human-vampire relations. His lips curved slightly. You would also be under my protection, which means anyone who harmed you would face my personal wrath. And I assure you, Miss Dalton, my wrath is something even the oldest vampires fear. Thea believed him. There was something in his voice, a cold promise of violence, that sent shivers down her spine. One more question, she said. Why me? Really? Not the political reasons, not the strategic benefits. Why choose a random farmhand from a nowhere village? Tiberius moved into the room, his movements predatory and graceful. He stopped a few feet from her, his crimson eyes searching her face. Because when Theron described how you stepped forward without hesitation, how you spoke of others having something worth living for while dismissing your own value, I saw something I have not seen in centuries. His voice softened slightly. Selflessness. True selflessness, without expectation of reward. It is rare, especially in my world where everyone wants something. You wanted nothing but to save others. That quality, that purity of intention is valuable beyond measure. Thea felt heat rise to her cheeks. I'm not some saint. I was scared. I am scared. Of course you are. Only a fool would not be frightened. Tiberius reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His skin was cool and smooth, his grip gentle. But fear did not stop you from doing what you believed was right. That is the definition of courage, Thea Dalton. And it is exactly what I need in a queen. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gesture so unexpectedly tender that Thea's breath caught. For a moment she forgot he was a vampire king who had lived for centuries. He was just a man, or something like a man looking at her with something that might have been admiration. Okay, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Tiberius smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Then we have a wedding to plan. The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity that left Thea's head spinning. Vampire seamstresses descended upon her, taking measurements and arguing in rapid French about fabric choices. Theron became her constant shadow, explaining court protocol and the intricacies of vampire politics, and Tiberius himself appeared each evening, spending hours answering her questions about vampire society, history, and the expectations of a queen. The noble houses are divided into factions, he explained one night, pointing to a complex diagram spread across a table in her sitting room. The old blood believes in maintaining strict separation between humans and vampires. So they see the treaty as a temporary measure, a necessary evil until vampires can regain full dominance. The new blood advocates for integration and cooperation. They believe our survival depends on coexistence with humanity. Which faction do you support? Thea asked, studying the names and house symbols. Neither, officially. A king cannot be seen as favoring one side over the other, or risk civil war. Tiberius leaned back in his chair. But personally, I find the old blood's position untenable. The world has changed. Humans outnumber us thousands to one and have technology we cannot match in daylight. War would be suicide for our species. So you support integration, I support survival. If that requires cooperation with humans, so be it. He looked at her steadily. Does that bother you? Knowing your future husband is pragmatic rather than idealistic. Thea considered the question. No, idealism without pragmatism is just fantasy. At least you're honest about your motivations. Honesty is one of the few luxuries of absolute power. Tiberius smiled slightly. I can afford to tell the truth because no one can challenge me effectively. That sounds lonely. The words slipped out before Thea could stop them. She immediately regretted her boldness, but Tiberius simply looked at her with an unreadable expression. It is, he said quietly, profoundly so. When you live for centuries, you watch everyone you care about die. Friends, lovers, allies all turn to dust eventually. It teaches you to keep distance, to not invest too deeply in temporary connections. He paused. It is one reason I have avoided marriage for so long. The idea of binding myself to someone, only to lose them to time, seemed unnecessarily painful. But you're willing to bind yourself to me, and I'm human. I'll die long before you. Yes. Tiberius met her eyes, which is why I am being clear from the beginning that this is a political arrangement. Affection would only complicate matters and make the inevitable end more difficult. Thea felt an odd pang in her chest at his words. It was ridiculous to feel hurt she had agreed to exactly these terms, but part of her had begun to hope that maybe, possibly, something more might develop between them. He was fascinating and terrifyingly intelligent, and occasionally showed glimpses of dry humor that made her laugh despite herself. But he had made his position clear. This was business. Nothing more. I understand, she said, keeping her voice neutral. If Tiberius noticed her change in tone, he gave no indication. He simply returned his attention to the diagram. Now, these three houses, Draven, Nightshade, and Thorn, are the most likely to cause problems during the wedding ceremony. They have the strongest ties to the old blood faction, and have been the most vocal about their disapproval of our marriage. The wedding took place in the Grand Cathedral at the heart of the underground city. Thea had not even known it existed until the morning of the ceremony, when Theron led her through winding passages to a massive carved door. This was built 500 years ago, he explained, when the court first established itself beneath London. It serves as a neutral ground for all vampire factions' sacred space where violence is forbidden. The doors opened, and Thea's breath caught. The cathedral was breathtaking. Vaulted ceilings rose into shadow, supported by columns carved to look like ancient trees. Stained glass windows had been fashioned from colored crystals that caught and reflected the lamplight, creating the illusion of sunlight without the deadly reality. Hundreds of vampires filled the pews, all turned to watch as Thea entered. She wore a gown of deep midnight blue, almost black, but with hints of color that shifted as she moved. The seamstresses had argued for white, but Thea had refused. White felt like a lie, a pretense of purity and innocence that had no place in this arrangement. Blue felt honest. Blue felt real. Her hair had been arranged in an elaborate style, woven with silver thread and small diamonds that caught the light. She wore no other jewelry. Tiberius had sent several pieces, but Thea had returned them all. She was a farmhand pretending to be a queen. She did not need to gild the lie with excessive decoration. Tiberius waited at the altar, resplendent in black and silver. His crown caught the light, and his white hair flowed loose over his shoulders. When Thea reached him, he extended his hand, and she took it. The ceremony was conducted in Latin by an ancient vampire priest, whose skin looked like parchment and whose eyes had faded to pale pink. Thea understood none of the words, but she responded when Theron whispered the appropriate phrases in English. She repeated vows she did not fully comprehend. She accepted a ring of black gold set with a blood-red ruby. She felt Tiberius slide a matching band onto his own finger, and then the priest pronounced them bound, and the cathedral erupted in a mixture of applause and angry murmuring. Tiberius leaned in close, his lips near her ear. Smile. Let them see you are not afraid. Thea lifted her chin and smiled at the assembled vampires, even as her heart raced with terror. She saw hatred in some faces, curiosity in others, and cold calculation in most. These were predators assessing new prey, and she was standing in their territory wearing a crown she had not earned. Come. Tiberius kept her hand in his and led her down the aisle. The worst is over. He was, as it turned out, completely wrong. The reception was held in the throne room, which had been transformed into a ballroom. Tables laden with food lined the walls, mostly raw meat, and what Thea suspected was blood mixed with wine. though there was a smaller table with human food that she gratefully headed toward. Your Majesty. A vampire woman stepped into their path. She was beautiful in the predatory way all vampires seem to be, with silver white hair and amber eyes. Her gown was scarlet, cut to emphasize her figure. Congratulations on your marriage. How unexpected. Tiberius's hand tightened slightly on Thea's. Lady Seraphina, thank you for attending. I would not have missed it for the world. Seraphina's smile was all teeth. Tell me, does your new bride understand what she has gotten herself into? Or did you neglect to mention certain complications? I'm standing right here, Thea said, her voice cool. If you have questions about my understanding, you can address them to me directly. Seraphina's eyebrows rose. Oh, she has spirit. How charming. The vampire leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that still carried clearly. Enjoy it while you can, little human. Tiberius goes through lovers quickly. I imagine a wife will prove even more disposable. Thea felt anger flash through her, hot and sharp. If I'm so disposable, why do you seem so threatened by me? For a moment, Seraphina's mask of civility slipped, revealing pure rage beneath. Then she recovered, laughed, and drifted away into the crowd. I apologize for that, Tiberius said quietly. Seraphina has been persistent in her pursuit. She did not take my rejection well, clearly. Thea watched the vampire disappear among the other guests. Is she dangerous? Potentially. But she will not move against you directly. She knows I would destroy her. More likely, she will spread rumors, undermine your authority, and attempt to make your life difficult in small, petty ways. He guided Thea toward the dance floor. Welcome to vampire politics, my queen. It is a game of shadows and knives, and you will need to learn quickly to survive it. That's reassuring. I did not promise this would be easy. Tiberius took her hand and placed his other on her waist. I only promised it would be interesting. Now we must dance. Everyone is watching, and we need to present a unified front. Thea had learned ballroom dancing from an elderly neighbor who had insisted all young ladies should know the basics. She had never expected to use those lessons in an underground vampire court, dancing with a king who moved like water and looked at her with ancient, unknowable eyes. You're good at this, she said as they swept across the floor. I have had several centuries to practice. A hint of amusement colored his voice. You are not terrible yourself. High praise is indeed. From me it is. They danced through 3 songs while the vampire court watched. Thea was acutely aware of every whisper, every disapproving glance, every assessment of her worthiness. She held her head high and tried to look like she belonged, even though she felt like a fraud. When the music finally ended, Tiberius escorted her to the high table and pulled out her chair. Survive the feast and then you can retire. I must remain for political discussions, but you are not expected to endure those. Trying to protect me? Thea settled into the chair, grateful to be off her feet. Trying to be practical. You have been thrown into deep water with very little preparation. I would prefer you not drown in your first week. It was, in its own way, considerate. Thea felt a flicker of warmth toward him, quickly suppressed. Business arrangement, she reminded herself. Not affection. The feast dragged on for hours. Vampire nobles approached in a steady stream, offering congratulations that ranged from genuine to viciously sarcastic. Thea smiled until her face hurt and answered questions about her background with as much grace as she could muster. So you are a farmer's daughter, one elderly vampire said, his tone dripping with disdain. How? Rustic! I do hope you will not track mud through the palace halls. I will do my best, Thea replied sweetly, though I make no promises. Old habits, you understand. The vampire harumphed and moved away, clearly unsure if he had been mocked. Theron appeared at her elbow. You are handling this well. I feel like I'm drowning. Yes, but drowning with dignity. He offered a slight smile. The king chose well. Most humans would have fled in tears by now. The night is young, indeed. Theron glanced around the room. I suggest you retire soon. There are elements here who would love to see you break, and exhaustion will make you vulnerable. Thea nodded and stood, catching Tiberius's eye. He excused himself from a conversation with several severe-looking vampires and came to her side immediately. I think I need to rest, she said quietly. Of course, he raised his voice, addressing the room. My queen retires for the evening. Continue to enjoy the celebration. He walked her to the doors, his hand on the small of her back. Once they were in the corridor, away from prying eyes, he spoke again. You did well tonight. Better than I expected, frankly. You expected me to fail? I expected you to be overwhelmed. There is a difference. He paused outside her chambers. These are your rooms. I am in the adjoining suite, should you need anything. My study is accessible through that door. He pointed to a carved panel in the wall. I will likely be working late most nights, but you are welcome to interrupt if necessary. Thank you. Thea hesitated. Tiberius, what happens now? I mean, day to day. What am I supposed to do? Learn, adapt, survive. His expression softened slightly. I know this is not the life you imagined, but you have proven yourself capable of extraordinary things, Thea Dalton. Do not doubt that now. He left before she could respond. Disappearing back toward the throne room and the waiting nobles, Thea entered her chambers and found them even more luxurious than her previous rooms. A massive bed dominated one wall, and a sitting area with comfortable chairs and a roaring fireplace occupied the other. French doors led to a private balcony. Everything was done in shades of deep blue and silver. Someone had paid attention to her preference for those colors. She dismissed the servants who tried to help her undress and managed to get out of the elaborate gown herself. She washed her face, braided her hair, and climbed into bed wearing a simple nightgown. Sealeaf did not come easily. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything that had happened. A week ago, she had been a farmhand. Now she was a queen. She had married a vampire king in a business arrangement that prohibited affection. She was surrounded by immortal predators who resented her existence, and somewhere, in the rooms next to hers, Tiberius was working late into the night, alone. Why did that thought make her sad? The days fell into a rhythm, though it was a strange rhythm for a human unused to vampire hours. Thea woke in the late afternoon, just as the vampire court was beginning to stir. She took her meals in her chambers, attended lessons in vampire history and politics with Theron, and appeared at Tiberius's side for formal court functions in the evening. Her husband, and it still felt strange to think of him that way, was attentive but distant. He ensured she had everything she needed, answered her questions with patience, and presented a united front during public appearances, but he did not seek her company otherwise. They lived in adjoining rooms but might as well have been in separate castles. Thea told herself it did not matter. This was the arrangement she had agreed to, but loneliness gnawed at her nonetheless. 3 weeks after the wedding, Thea woke to raised voices coming from Tiberius's study. She hesitated, then pulled on a robe and moved to the connecting door. She could hear multiple vampires arguing, their words sharp with anger. Cannot simply ignore tradition. The marriage is a disgrace. Your Majesty, you must reconsider. Tiberius's voice cut through the chaos, cold as winter frost. I will reconsider nothing. The marriage stands, and anyone who challenges it challenges me directly. Is that what you wish, Lord Draven? To face me in single combat? Silence followed his words, heavy with threat. Then a new voice spoke, smooth and poisonous. No one wishes to challenge you, Your Majesty. We simply question whether a human is capable of fulfilling a queen's duties. Already there are rumors of impropriety, of your new bride failing to understand basic protocol. Perhaps it would be kinder to all involved if the marriage were quietly annulled. Kinder to whom? Certainly not to me, as I am quite satisfied with my choice. Tiberius's tone grew even colder. These rumors you mention, I suggest you examine their source carefully. I have found that those who spread malicious gossip often do so to disguise their own inadequacies. Thea heard the clear dismissal in his words, followed by the sounds of movement and muttered farewells. She retreated to her sitting area, not wanting to be caught eavesdropping. A moment later, the connecting door opened, and Tiberius entered. He looked tired, not physically, as vampires never seem to tire but emotionally worn. When he saw Thea, he stopped. You heard some of it. I'm sorry. I know this is causing you political problems. Political problems are my constant companions. I am accustomed to them. He moved to the fireplace, staring into the flames. What concerns me more is that you are bearing the brunt of their displeasure. The rumors they mentioned, have you heard them? A few. That I am uncultured, that I use the wrong fork at dinner, that I cannot possibly understand the complexities of vampire society. Thea shrugged. They are not entirely wrong. They are entirely wrong about what matters. Tiberius turned to face her. You may not know which fork to use, but you have shown more genuine grace and courage than most vampires I have known. The nobility's obsession with superficial protocol blinds them to actual worth. The intensity in his voice startled Thea. You sound angry. I am angry. At them for their short-sighted prejudice. At myself for not anticipating how cruel they would be. He crossed the room to stand before her. This was supposed to be a mutually beneficial arrangement. Instead, I have made you a target. I knew what I was agreeing to. Did you? Did you truly understand what it would mean to be isolated in a court of predators with only my protection standing between you and their fangs? His hands clenched at his sides. I am beginning to think I made a terrible mistake, not in choosing you, but in bringing you here at all. Thea stood, closing the distance between them until only a foot separated them. Stop. You are not responsible for their behavior. They chose to be cruel. They chose to spread rumors. That is on them, not you. But I enabled it by what? By giving me a choice between death and life? By offering my village permanent protection? By treating me with more respect than I have received from anyone since I arrived? Thea reached out and took his hand, feeling the coolness of his skin against her warmth. You have been nothing but honest and honorable, Tiberius. Do not take responsibility for the sins of others. He looked down at their joined hands, his expression unreadable. You are far kinder than I deserve, or maybe you are far harder on yourself than necessary. For a long moment they stood in silence. Then Tiberius gently pulled his hand away, creating distance again. It is late. You should rest. It was a dismissal. Polite but firm. Thea nodded and retreated to her bedroom, feeling the familiar ache of loneliness settle over her like a familiar coat. She had married a man who would not let himself care, and she was beginning to realize that she wanted him to. The situation came to a head a month after the wedding. Thea was walking through the palace gardens, an elaborate underground space filled with plants that thrived in lamplight and magical cultivation, when she overheard a conversation between several vampire ladies. Cannot believe he continues to keep her around. Surely he has realized his mistake by now. Perhaps he has grown fond of his little pet. Some vampires do develop strange attachments to their food. Laughter, sharp and cruel. Give it time. She is human, fragile, easily broken. One well-placed accident, and the problem resolves itself. Thea's blood ran cold. She stepped around the hedge that had concealed her, facing the three vampires directly. If you have something to say about me, say it to my face. The vampires turned, their expressions shifting from surprise to disdain. The speaker was Lady Seraphina, flanked by two younger vampires who watched Thea with predatory interest. Your Majesty. Seraphina's tone made the title sound like an insult. I did not realize you were eavesdropping. I was walking in the gardens. You were the one speaking loudly enough to be overheard. Thea kept her voice steady, though fear thrummed through her veins. And I believe you just threatened me. That seems unwise, given that I am under the king's protection. Protection. Seraphina laughed. You think Tiberius truly cares what happens to you. You are a political tool, nothing more. Once you have served your purpose, you will be discarded like all his previous amusements. If I am so insignificant, why do I frighten you so much? Seraphina's eyes flashed. You do not frighten me, human. Then why dedicate so much energy to undermining me? Why spread rumors and lobby for annulment? Thea took a step forward, channeling every ounce of confidence she did not feel. I think you are afraid that I will succeed, that I will prove a human can be a worthy queen, and that terrifies you, because it undermines everything you believe about vampire superiority. How dare you? How dare I what? Speak the truth. Thea's anger finally broke through her fear. I stepped forward to save my village from death. I agreed to marry a stranger to protect people I love. What have you ever sacrificed, Lady Seraphina? What have you ever done that did not serve your own ambition? Seraphina moved with inhuman speed, crossing the distance between them in a heartbeat. Her hand wrapped around Thea's throat, sharp nails pricking the skin. You forget yourself, human. I could snap your neck before anyone could stop me. You could. Thea forced the words out despite the pressure on her throat. But then you would face the king's wrath. Are you prepared for that? Are you willing to die for the satisfaction of killing me? For a long moment, Seraphina's grip tightened. Thea saw her own death reflected in those amber eyes. Then, abruptly, the vampire released her and stepped back. This is not over, Seraphina hissed. I did not think it was. The three vampires swept away, leaving Thea alone in the garden, with her heart pounding and her hands shaking. She sank onto a nearby bench, trying to calm her breathing. She had just made a powerful enemy. And despite her brave words, she had no idea how to protect herself from a vampire determined to see her dead. That was either very brave or very foolish. Thea jerked around to find Theron leaning against a tree, his expression thoughtful. How long have you been there? Long enough. He moved to sit beside her on the bench. You have spirit. I will grant you that. But spirit alone will not save you from someone like Seraphina. What do you suggest? That I cower and let her win? I suggest you learn to fight back in ways that matter. Theron met her eyes. This is a court of shadows and politics, Thea. Physical courage is admirable. But you need other weapons, information, alliances, leverage. I am a farmhand. I have no idea how to play those games. Then learn. Quickly. Theron stood, offering his hand. Come, it is time you received a different kind of education. Over the next several weeks, Theron became Thea's guide to the darker side of vampire politics. He taught her how to gather information, how to identify allies and enemies, how to speak in the careful language of court where every word carried multiple meanings. Seraphina's power comes from her family connections, Theron explained one evening, showing Thea a complex chart of vampire lineages. The House of Bloodmore is old and influential, but they have made enemies. House Nightshade, for instance, has been locked in a territorial dispute with them for 50 years. So if I could forge an alliance with House Nightshade, you would have powerful friends and could undermine Seraphina's support base. Theron smiled. Exactly. You learn quickly. Thea threw herself into the lessons with desperate focus. She memorized family trees and ancient grudges. She learned which vampires valued honor above all else and which would sell their loyalty for the right price. She attended court functions and listened more than she spoke, filing away valuable information, and slowly, carefully, she began to build her own power base. Lady Evangeline of House Nightshade became her first real ally. The ancient vampire had initially regarded Thea with cool disdain, but after several carefully orchestrated meetings, Evangeline's attitude shifted to something resembling respect. "You are not what I expected," Evangeline said one evening, sipping blood wine in Thea's sitting room. "I thought the king had lost his mind marrying a human, but you have a tactical mind. Unusual for your kind. Thank you, I think." Thea poured herself regular wine, grateful that at least some human refreshments were available in the palace. "I wanted to discuss the trade agreement your house has been seeking with the Southern Territories." "Oh?" Evangeline's interest sharpened. "What do you know of that?" "I know the king has been hesitant to approve it due to concerns about House Bloodmore's opposition, but if I were to advocate for the agreement, emphasizing the benefits to the overall court stability, he might reconsider. And in exchange?" "In exchange, House Nightshade votes against Lady Seraphina's proposal to establish new tribute quotas in the northern villages." Thea kept her voice steady. "I understand she has been lobbying hard for increased collections. I would like to see that proposal fail." Evangeline studied her for a long moment, then smiled a genuine expression, not the predatory baring of teeth Thea had come to expect. "You are playing a dangerous game, little queen, but I appreciate the strategy." "Very well. House Nightshade will oppose Seraphina's proposal. And perhaps I have underestimated the value of a human perspective in court matters." It was a small victory, but it felt enormous. Thea had successfully navigated vampire politics and secured an ally. For the first time since arriving at court, she felt like she might actually survive this. Tiberius noticed the change immediately. One evening, after a particularly contentious court session where Seraphina's proposal had been voted down, he requested Thea's presence in his study. "You have been busy," he said without preamble, gesturing for her to sit. "House Nightshade's sudden support for your positions, the shifting alliances in the lower nobility, the whisper campaign highlighting Seraphina's past indiscretions." His crimson eyes fixed on her. "You are learning to play the game. You sound surprised." "I am impressed. There is a difference." He leaned back in his chair. "I chose you for your courage and selflessness. I did not expect you to develop into a genuine political force so quickly. Theron has been an excellent teacher. Theron is loyal and competent. But the strategy is yours." Tiberius stood and moved to pour 2 glasses of wine. He handed one to Thea. "You are becoming exactly what I needed in a queen. Someone who can stand beside me, not just behind me." The praise warmed Thea more than it should have. "Thank you." However, Tiberius's expression grew serious. "I must warn you. Seraphina will not take her defeats lightly. She is dangerous, Thea, and she now sees you as a genuine threat rather than a temporary nuisance." "You must be careful. I am always careful. Are you?" He moved closer, his gaze intense. "You confronted her in the gardens, alone, unarmed. That was not careful. That was reckless. She was threatening me. I refused to show fear. Bravery and stupidity often look identical from a distance." Tiberius reached out and tilted her chin up, his touch gentle despite his stern words. "I cannot protect you if you insist on putting yourself in danger. Seraphina is capable of murder, Thea. She has killed before, and she will kill again if she believes she can escape consequences. Then I will ensure she cannot escape consequences." Thea met his eyes, refusing to look away. "I am not helpless, Tiberius. I will not cower. I know. That is part of why I—" He stopped abruptly, his hand dropping away. "Just be careful. Please, what were you going to say?" "Nothing of consequence." He turned away, dismissing the moment. "You should rest. Tomorrow night's council meeting will be difficult." Thea wanted to push, wanted to demand he finish his sentence, but his closed expression made it clear the conversation was over. She left his study, feeling frustrated and confused. He had been about to say something. Something important. She was sure of it. But what? The assassination attempt came 2 weeks later, in the form of poisoned wine at a formal banquet. Thea had just raised her glass to her lips when Theron appeared at her side, knocking the goblet from her hand. Do not drink that, he said urgently. The wine splashed across the table, and for a moment everyone in the immediate vicinity stared in shock. Then chaos erupted. Tiberius was at Thea's side in an instant, his hand on her shoulder. Are you hurt? Did you drink any? No. Theron stopped me. Thea's heart raced. What poison? Theron gestured to the spilled wine, which was eating through the tablecloth like acid. Silver nitrate mixed with nightshade. It would have killed her within minutes, even with medical intervention. Tiberius's expression went cold, his eyes blazing with fury. Who served this wine? A servant stepped forward, trembling. I did, your majesty. But I swear I did not poison it. The bottle came from where? Tiberius's voice could have frozen fire. From Lady Seraphina's estate, my lord. She donated several cases for tonight's banquet. The throne room went silent. Every eye turned to Seraphina, who stood frozen at a nearby table, her face pale. Your majesty, I assure you, I knew nothing of this. Arrest her. Tiberius's command cracked like a whip, and arrest everyone in her household staff. I want a full investigation, now. Guards moved forward immediately, seizing Seraphina despite her protests. Other vampires scattered, not wanting to be associated with a scandal. Within minutes, the banquet had dissolved into chaos. Tiberius turned to Thea, his hands framing her face, his touch gentle despite the violence in his eyes. Are you certain you did not drink any? I am certain. Theron saved me. Thank you, Tiberius said to Theron, his voice rough with emotion. Your vigilance has preserved something precious. Theron bowed. I live to serve, your majesty. Tiberius looked back at Thea, and for the first time since she had met him, she saw genuine fear in his expression. Come, we are leaving, now. He swept her from the throne room, moving with inhuman speed through the corridors until they reached his private chambers. He locked the door behind them, then pulled Thea into his arms, holding her with desperate strength. I could have lost you, he whispered against her hair. I could have lost you, and it would have been my fault for bringing you here. Thea stood frozen in his embrace, shocked by the sudden display of emotion. Tiberius, I told myself this was just a political arrangement. I told myself I would not become attached. I have spent weeks maintaining careful distance, reminding myself that you are temporary, that affection would only cause pain. His arms tightened around her. But when I saw that wine spill, when I realized how close I came to losing you, I knew I had been lying to myself. Thea's heart pounded. What are you saying? Tiberius pulled back just enough to look at her, his crimson eyes burning with intensity. I am saying that I have fallen in love with you, Thea Dalton. Against all logic, against all my careful planning, against every wall I built to prevent exactly this, I love you. The words hung in the air between them, impossible and terrifying and wonderful. You said this was just business, Thea whispered. You said affection would complicate things. I was wrong. Or perhaps I was a coward, trying to protect myself from inevitable hurt. He cupped her face in his hands. You have proven yourself brave in ways I never anticipated. The least I can do is match your courage with my own honesty. I love you. I do not expect you to return the feeling I know this marriage was forced upon you, but I needed you to know. Thea felt tears prick her eyes. You think I do not love you back? Tiberius went very still. Do you? I have been falling for you since the first week, Thea admitted. Every conversation, every small kindness, every moment of dry humor, I fell a little more. But you were so distant, so determined to maintain boundaries, I thought. She laughed shakily. I thought you could never care for someone like me. Someone like you? Tiberius's voice filled with wonder. Thea, you are the most extraordinary person I have met in 500 years of existence. Your courage, your compassion, your intelligence, you have brought light into a world of shadows. How could I not love you? Then he was kissing her, and Thea was kissing him back, and everything else fell away. His lips were cool against hers, gentle at first, then deepening with passion and desperation. She wound her arms around his neck, pressing closer, feeling his strength and his vulnerability in equal measure. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Tiberius rested his forehead against hers. I will not lose you, he said fiercely. Not to Seraphina, not to poison, not to any threat that exists in this world or the next. You are mine, Thea, and I protect what is mine with every ounce of power I possess. I am yours, Thea agreed. And you are mine. We protect each other. Yes. He kissed her again, softer this time. Together. The investigation into Seraphina's assassination attempt took 3 days. Thea spent most of that time in Tiberius's chambers, under heavy guard, while he personally oversaw every aspect of the inquiry. When he finally emerged, his expression was grim. She confessed, he told Thea. Not out of remorse, but because she saw no point in denial. The evidence was overwhelming. She orchestrated the poisoning, believing she could frame one of your new allies and destabilize your support base. What happens to her now? Execution. At dawn, 3 days hence. Tiberius's voice was flat. Attempted murder of the queen is treason. The penalty is death. Thea should have felt satisfaction, but instead she felt only sadness. She was that desperate to maintain her vision of how the world should be. She was that proud. Pride is the oldest vampire sin and often the deadliest. Tiberius took her hand. You do not have to attend the execution if you do not wish. It will be unpleasant. I will attend. Thea straightened her shoulders. She tried to kill me. The least I can do is bear witness to the consequences. The execution took place in the cathedral, the same space where Thea had been married. Seraphina was brought forward in chains, her silver hair disheveled, her amber eyes dull with resignation. The ancient priest read the charges in Latin, then translated them to English for Thea's benefit. Lady Seraphina of House Bloodmore, you have been found guilty of treason through attempted murder of Queen Thea. The sentence is death by sunlight. Have you any final words? Seraphina lifted her head, her gaze finding Thea in the crowd. I underestimated you. That was my mistake. You are stronger than you appear, little human. Perhaps, she paused. Perhaps there is more to your kind than I believed. I will die knowing I was wrong. That is a cold comfort, but comfort nonetheless. It was not an apology, but it was something. Acknowledgement? Perhaps. A final moment of clarity before the end. The guards led Seraphina to a special chamber with a retractable ceiling. At the appointed moment, the ceiling opened, and dawn sunlight poured in. Seraphina burned. Not with fire, but with light a terrible, radiant dissolution that consumed her from within. It took less than a minute. When the ceiling closed again, only ash remained. Thea turned away, feeling sick. Tiberius put a steadying hand on her back. Justice is not always gentle, he said quietly. But it is necessary. She would have killed you without remorse. I know. Thea leaned into him, drawing strength from his presence. I wish it could have been different. So do I. He led her from the cathedral. So do I. In the weeks that followed, the court's attitude toward Thea shifted dramatically. Seraphina's downfall had sent a clear message. The human queen was under the king's protection, and any threat against her would be met with absolute consequences. More than that, though, Thea's own political maneuvering had earned her grudging respect from many of the noble houses. Lady Evangeline became a regular visitor, offering advice and, occasionally, friendship. Other vampires who had initially scorned Thea began to seek her opinion on court matters. She was not universally beloved. The old blood faction remained hostile, but she had carved out a position of genuine authority, and through it all, Tiberius was beside her. Not just in public, but in private. They spent evenings in his study, discussing politics and history and philosophy. They walked through the underground gardens, hands intertwined. They laughed at private jokes and argued about trivial matters, and slowly built something that looked remarkably like a real marriage. I want to see the surface, Thea said one night, lying in Tiberius's arms. They had finally, naturally, progressed to sharing a bed, though their physical relationship remained careful and tender. I miss the sun. I cannot go with you during the day, Tiberius said, his fingers trailing through her hair, but I can arrange for you to visit your family. Theron can escort you, and guards can maintain watch from the shadows. Really? Thea sat up, excitement flooding through her. You would let me go? You are not a prisoner, my love. You never were. He smiled. Though I confess I will count every minute until you return. I will not stay long, Thea promised. Just long enough to let them see I am alive and well. That I am, she paused. That I am happy. Are you? Truly? Tiberius's expression grew serious. I know this life is not what you would have chosen for yourself. No, Thea agreed. I would have chosen a simple life in Ashford, probably married to a local farmer, raising children and growing old surrounded by familiar faces. She leaned down and kissed him softly. But I would not have chosen you. And now that I have you, I cannot imagine wanting anything else. You have become my happiness, Tiberius. You and this strange, complicated, beautiful life we are building together. His arms came around her, pulling her close. I do not deserve you. Probably not, Thea teased. But you are stuck with me regardless. Thank gods for that. The visit to Ashford was bittersweet. Thea's family wept with joy when she stepped out of the carriage, mobbing her with hugs and questions. The entire village turned out to see their sacrifice returned alive and well, dressed in fine clothing, and accompanied by an escort of guards that spoke to her elevated status. You are a queen, her mother kept repeating, touching Thea's face as if to confirm she was real. Our Thea, a vampire queen. I can hardly believe it. Believe it. Thea hugged her mother tightly. And believe that I am well treated and happy. The king he is a good man. Or vampire, whatever the proper terminology. Molly would not leave Thea's side, clinging to her arm. I thought you were dead. We all thought you were dead. I know. I am sorry you had to suffer that grief." Thea brushed her sister's hair back from her face. "But I am alive, and I promise I will visit as often as I can. Can we come see you?" Thea hesitated, thinking of the underground court with its predatory inhabitants. "Perhaps when you are older. It is complicated. The vampire world is beautiful but dangerous, and I would not risk you until I am certain you would be safe." Her father took her aside before she left, his weathered face serious. "Are you truly happy, Thea? Or are you just saying that to spare us worry?" "I am truly happy, Dad." Thea took his hands. "I know it sounds impossible, but I have fallen in love with Tiberius. And he loves me. This marriage that started as political necessity has become something real." Her father studied her face, then nodded slowly. "I can see it in your eyes. You glow when you speak of him." He pulled her into a tight hug. "Then I am happy for you, daughter, and grateful to the Vampire King who gave you a chance at life instead of taking it." The journey back to the underground court felt like coming home. Thea had not expected that. She had assumed she would always long for the surface, for sunlight and open sky. But when she descended into the cavern and saw the twinkling lights of the vampire city, she felt her heart lift. Tiberius was waiting at the palace entrance. He must have been watching for her arrival, too impatient to remain in his study. When Thea stepped out of the carriage, he swept her into his arms, holding her close. "I missed you," he murmured against her hair. "I was gone less than a day. Far too long." He pulled back to look at her. "How was it?" "Wonderful, painful, bittersweet." Thea smiled. "But I am glad to be back. Is that strange, to consider this place home?" "Not strange at all." Tiberius took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "Home is where you are loved, and you are very loved here." They walked together through the palace corridors, past guards who bowed and servants who smiled. Thea realized that somewhere along the way, without her noticing, she had truly become the queen, not just in title, but in the eyes of those who served here. "There is something I wish to discuss with you," Tiberius said as they entered his chambers. "A proposal of sorts." "Another one?" The first worked out so well. Thea's tone was teasing, but she felt a flutter of nervousness. Tiberius smiled at her joke, then grew serious. "I want to offer you transformation, the chance to become vampire." Thea's breath caught. "What?" "You do not have to decide now, or ever if you do not wish." He led her to sit on the couch, settling beside her. "But I have been thinking about your mortality, about the limited time we have together. The thought of losing you to age, of watching you grow old and die while I remain unchanged, it is unbearable. If you chose transformation, we could have centuries together. Perhaps eternity. I would become like you?" Thea tried to process the idea. "Drink blood? Avoid sunlight? Live forever?" "Yes. It is not without cost. You would lose the warmth of your humanity, the ability to walk in daylight, the simple pleasures of human food and drink, but you would gain time. Time for us to build our life together. Time to truly master the role of queen. Time to..." He paused. "Time to grow old together in our own way." Thea thought of Molly, of her parents, of watching them age while she remained frozen at 23. She thought of sunlight on her face and the taste of fresh bread and all the small human pleasures she would sacrifice, but she also thought of Tiberius, of his steady presence and quiet strength, of the love that had grown between them against all odds. She thought of the life they were building in the shadows, the good they could do with centuries to work instead of mere decades. "I need time to think about it," she said finally. "Of course." Tiberius kissed her forehead. "It is not a decision to be made lightly. Take whatever time you need. I will love you regardless of your choice, even if I choose to remain human, to grow old and leave you alone. Even then." His voice was fierce. "I would rather have a handful of years with you as you are than an eternity without you." "Never doubt that." Thea spent the next several weeks considering her options. She spoke with Theron about the transformation process, the pain, the changes, the strange new hungers that would define her existence. She spoke with Lady Evangeline about the experience of vampire life, the loneliness of watching human friends die, the weight of centuries, the strange disconnection that came from being removed from the flow of normal time. And she spoke with Tiberius, late at night when they lay tangled together in his bed, about hopes and fears and futures both bright and dark. "What if I become someone different?" she asked one evening. "What if the transformation changes more than just my body? What if I lose the parts of myself that you love? Transformation amplifies what exists. It does not replace it." Tiberius traced patterns on her bare shoulder. "Your courage, your compassion, your quick mind, those are intrinsic to who you are. They will not disappear." "But you cannot guarantee that." "No," he admitted. "I cannot guarantee anything. Transformation is a leap of faith. But so was stepping forward to save your village. So was marrying a stranger. So is learning to love me despite every logical reason not to. You have taken many leaps of faith, Thea. What is one more? She laughed, then sobered. I am afraid. So am I. He pulled her closer. I am afraid the transformation will hurt you. I am afraid you will regret the choice. I am afraid of 1,000 things that might go wrong, but I am more afraid of losing you to time, of having only a few short decades together when we could have centuries. Thea turned to face him fully. If I do this, there is no going back. No, I will never see another sunrise. No, I will have to drink blood to survive. Yes, I will watch my family grow old and die while I remain unchanged. Tiberius's expression filled with sorrow. Yes, that is perhaps the cruelest cost. I will not lie to you about it. Thea closed her eyes, thinking of Molly's laughter, of her mother's warm hugs, of her father's steady presence. Then she opened them and looked at the man the vampire who had become her whole world. I want to do it. Not right away, she added quickly. I want to visit my family a few more times. I want to say proper goodbyes, even if they do not understand what I am saying goodbye to. And I want to be certain, beyond any doubt, that this is what I want. But, she took a breath, but yes, eventually I want to transform. I want forever with you, Tiberius. His arms tightened around her, and she felt moisture on her shoulder where his face pressed against her skin. It took her a moment to realize he was crying silent tears of relief or joy or fear, perhaps all three. I love you, he whispered. I love you more than I have words to express. Then show me, Thea said, pulling him closer. Show me what forever could be like. And he did. 3 months later, on the anniversary of their wedding, Thea made her final visit to Ashford. She spent a week with her family, memorizing every detail of their faces, storing up memories of laughter and warmth and human connection. She did not tell them what was coming, how could she? But she hugged them extra tight and told them repeatedly how much she loved them. You seem sad, Molly observed on the last evening. Are you sure you are happy in the vampire court? I am happy, Thea assured her. I am just aware of how precious time is, how quickly it passes. I want to savor every moment with the people I love. You are being weird, Molly said, but she hugged Thea anyway. Promise you will visit again soon. I promise. It was not technically a lie. She would visit, just not as often as Molly hoped, and not in the same way. Vampire visits carried different risks. The transformation took place in a private ceremony attended only by Tiberius, Theron, and a vampire physician who specialized in the process. Thea lay on a bed in a sealed chamber, her heart racing with fear and anticipation. It will hurt, Tiberius warned her one last time, considerably, but I will be here the entire time. I will not leave you. I know. Thea reached for his hand. I trust you. The vampire physician approached with a silver dagger and an ancient grimoire. The ceremony was conducted in Latin, words of power and binding that resonated through the chamber. Then the physician cut Thea's wrist and Tiberius's, pressing the wounds together. Drink, Tiberius said softly. Drink until you feel my blood burning through your veins. Thea drank. His blood tasted like copper and starlight, ancient and powerful. It burned as it went down, a fire that spread from her throat to her chest to her limbs. She gasped, tried to pull away, but Tiberius held her steady. Stay with me, he urged. A little longer. The pain intensified, becoming overwhelming. Thea felt her human body dying, cells transforming, mortality giving way to something else. She screamed, distantly aware of Tiberius holding her, whispering words of comfort and love. The world fractured into shards of agony and light and impossible darkness. Then, abruptly, it stopped. Thea opened her eyes and saw the world with perfect, terrifying clarity. Every detail stood out in sharp relief, the individual threads in the silk sheets, the faint patterns in the stone ceiling, the minute expressions crossing Tiberius's face as he watched her. Thea? His voice was cautious, hopeful, afraid. How do you feel? She sat up slowly, testing her new body. Everything felt different, stronger, faster, more. Her senses had expanded to encompass sounds and smells she had never noticed before, and underneath it all, a new hunger prowled, dark and insistent. I feel... She paused, searching for words. I feel powerful and hungry, and like myself, but more so. She looked at her hands, seeing pale skin that would never tan again, never age, never bear the marks of time. It worked. Tiberius pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the most precious thing in existence. Welcome to immortality, my love, my queen, my forever. The transition was not easy. The first few weeks were hardest, as Thea learned to control her new hungers and abilities. The need for blood was constant and demanding, and learning to feed without killing required patience and practice. Tiberius stayed by her side through all of it, teaching her control, offering his own blood when the hunger became too intense, never judging her failures. It gets easier, he promised after a particularly difficult night where Thea had nearly lost control with a blood donor. In time, you will not even think about it. The hunger becomes background noise, manageable and mundane. How long did it take you? 50 years. At her expression, he laughed. But I had no one to guide me. The vampire who transformed me abandoned me immediately afterward. I had to learn everything alone. You have me. You have Theron. You have Lady Evangeline, who has offered her assistance. You will master this faster than I did. He was right. Within 6 months, Thea had learned to control her new nature. The hunger remained, but it no longer controlled her. She could feed cleanly and carefully, taking only what she needed without causing undue harm. She grew comfortable with her increased strength and speed, learning to move through the world without accidentally breaking things. And she discovered that transformation had not changed the essential core of who she was. She still cared about justice and compassion. She still felt love and fear and joy. She was still Thea, just more. You have adapted remarkably well, Lady Evangeline observed one evening. Most new vampires struggle for years. You have mastered yourself in months. I am motivated, Thea said simply. I chose this life. I am not about to waste it floundering. The years began to pass. Thea settled fully into her role as queen, using her position to advocate for better treatment of human communities and gradual integration between the species. It was slow work. Vampire society changed at glacial pace, but she saw progress. Tribute requirements decreased. The Treaty of Shadows was amended to include protections for human villages. New laws established rights for humans working in vampire territories. And through it all, Tiberius supported her, his love unwavering and deep. You have changed the court, he told her on their 10th anniversary. Not just politically, though your reforms have been significant. You have changed how vampires think about humans, about power, about what a queen can be. You have made them reconsider assumptions that have stood for centuries. We have changed things, Thea corrected. I could not have done any of it without you, perhaps. His smile was soft. But I think you underestimate your own strength. You have always been extraordinary, Thea. I simply gave you a stage to prove it. They stood on the balcony of their chambers, looking out over the underground city that had become their home. Lights twinkled in the darkness, and vampires moved through the streets below, going about their eternal lives. Somewhere far above, the world turned without them, sunlight painting the sky in colors Thea would never see again. She did not regret her choice. Not even for a moment. I have been thinking, she said slowly, about expansion, about establishing more integrated communities where vampires and humans can coexist peacefully, rather than maintaining strict separation. That would be controversial. Everything I do is controversial. Thea turned to face him. But I think it is necessary. The world is changing, Tiberius. Technology is advancing. Human populations are growing. The old ways of maintaining distance and demanding tributes, they are not sustainable long term. Eventually, we will have to choose genuine integration or inevitable conflict. I would rather work toward the former. Tiberius studied her face, his expression thoughtful. You are talking about decades of work, perhaps centuries. Are you prepared for that? I have centuries to give. Thea took his hand, feeling the familiar coolness of his skin. And I have you beside me. Together, we can build something better. Something that honors both humans and vampires. Something worthy of the sacrifices that brought us here. Together, Tiberius agreed. He pulled her close, kissing her with a tenderness that had only grown over their years together. Always together. The reforms took time, just as Thea had predicted. But slowly, steadily, the vampire world began to change. The first integrated community was established 15 years after Thea's transformation, a small town where humans and vampires lived side by side, sharing resources and governance. It was an experiment, fragile and controversial, but it succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. More communities followed. The Treaty of Shadows was revised multiple times, each iteration granting more protections and rights to human populations. The tribute system was gradually phased out entirely, replaced by voluntary blood donations that compensated humans fairly for their contribution. Thea visited her family as often as she could, though the visits became bittersweet as the years passed. She watched Molly grow up, marry, have children of her own. She watched her parents age, their hair graying, their movements slowing, and she held them when they died, first her father, and then, 3 years later, her mother, knowing that she would carry their memories forward into an immortal future. I miss them, she told Tiberius after her mother's funeral. I knew this was coming. I prepared for it. But it still hurts. It always does. He held her as she cried, his own experience with loss allowing him to offer comfort without empty platitudes. The pain means they mattered, that you love them enough for their absence to leave a hole. It is the price of caring, and it is worth paying, even if it hurts forever, even then. He kissed her forehead. We carry our loved ones forward, Thea. Their memories live in us. Your parents will never truly be gone as long as you remember them. Thea took comfort in his words and in the knowledge that Molly and her children remained. She became the mysterious, ageless aunt who visited occasionally, bringing gifts and stories. Molly never questioned why Thea never aged, never changed. Some truths were better left unspoken. 50 years after their wedding, the vampire court held a grand celebration. The nobles who had once scorned Thea now praised her reforms and her leadership. New generations of vampires had grown up with her as queen and knew no other way. The old prejudices had not disappeared entirely, but they had faded, replaced by grudging respect and in some cases, genuine admiration. You have done what I thought impossible, Lady Evangeline said during the celebration. You have dragged vampire society into a new era, kicking and screaming the entire way. It has been glorious to watch. I had help, Thea said, smiling. A great deal of help, yes, but the vision was yours. The courage to pursue it was yours. Evangeline raised her glass. To Queen Thea, who proved that sometimes the greatest revolutions come from the most unexpected sources. Tiberius found Thea later, pulling her away from the celebration to a quiet balcony where they could be alone. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. Happy anniversary, my love. Happy anniversary. Thea leaned back against him. 50 years. It sounds impossible. We have many more ahead of us. His voice held quiet contentment. I used to fear eternity. It seemed like a burden, an endless expanse of empty time. But with you, I find myself looking forward to every century, every decade, every single night. You have made immortality a gift instead of a curse. Thea turned in his arms, looking up at the vampire king, who had become her everything. His face was unchanged from the day they met, pale and beautiful and ageless, but his eyes held depths that had not been there 50 years ago. Love and partnership and shared experience had carved new dimensions into his ancient soul. I love you, she said simply. For all eternity, I love you, and I love you. He kissed her, deep and lingering. From the moment you stepped forward to save your village, I have been yours. I will be yours until the stars burn out and the world ends. This I promise you, Thea Constantine. My wife. My queen. My forever. They stood together on the balcony, looking out over the city they had built and the future that stretched endlessly before them. The girl who had offered her life for her village had become a queen who changed an entire society. The vampire king who had demanded a tribute had found a partner who transformed his lonely existence into something worth celebrating. And together, they would face eternity with courage, compassion, and a love that defied all expectation. The end of the story was, in truth, just the beginning. Years turned into decades, decades into centuries. Thea and Tiberius remained at the heart of the vampire court, guiding their people through changes and challenges that would have seemed impossible in earlier ages. The world above transformed, technology advanced, human society evolved, and the careful balance between vampire and human adapted with it. Through it all, Thea held to the principles that had defined her from the beginning. She fought for the vulnerable. She advocated for justice and compassion. She built bridges between divided communities and never forgot the farmhand she had been or the village she had saved. And beside her, always, was Tiberius, her husband, her partner, her complement in all things. Their love remained the foundation upon which everything else was built, a love that had begun in sacrifice and grown into something eternal. On their 100th anniversary, as they stood once again on that familiar balcony, Tiberius took Thea's hand and spoke the words that had become their tradition. Thank you for choosing me, for choosing this life, for choosing forever. Thea smiled, squeezing his hand. Thank you for seeing something worth saving in a scared farmhand who stepped forward to die, for giving me the chance to become more than I ever imagined possible. You were always extraordinary. I simply recognized it. We recognized it in each other. Thea leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the familiar comfort of his presence. And we built something beautiful from impossible circumstances. I would not change a single moment, Tiberius. Not one, nor would I. He kissed her temple. Here is to the next 100 years, my love, and the 100 after that, and all the centuries still to come. 2 forever, Thea agreed. Together. And as the underground city sparkled beneath them and the weight of immortality rested lightly on their shoulders, the farmhand turned queen, and the vampire king who loved her stood hand in hand, facing an infinite future with courage, hope, and an unbreakable bond forged in the shadows and sealed with sacrifice. They had found their forever, and it was more than either of them had dared to dream.